And on behalf of everybody from this group, Prabhuji, we'd like to pay our humble obeisances. Prabhuji, Dandvat Pranam. Prabhuji, we are reading the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and we are on chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called the Dhyana Yoga. And today we would like to do text 39 and 40, Prabhuji. Because text 39 is very small and will benefit from your association for text 40 as well.
Okay, sure.
So Prabhuji, you lead and we'll follow.
Okay, since we have two Sanskrit verses, I'm not going to do both actually. And since of the two verses, the 40th one in one sense is more important because it connects with several verses where Arjuna has been talking. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the translation of 39 and then we'll discuss up to this point, and then probably about halfway through the class, we'll actually do verse 40. It's necessary because verse 40 is the answer to Arjuna's questions which have come before. So it's necessary to study that first. Otherwise, we'll be a little bit lost because it's always important to study the context of the verse. Hare Krishna. It's important to study the context of the verse as well as the verse itself so that we understand how it fits into the whole picture. So you'll note that in 39, this is the end of Arjuna's questioning process. Arjuna says, this is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Now, Arjuna is asking because Krishna is the greatest authority. That is why he says, except for you, there's no one who can dispel this doubt. Because it's a tricky question that Arjuna is asking. And also to understand this verse, we have to look back. Actually, we have to go all the way back to 33 in order that we can understand the flow of verses and why Arjuna is speaking like this. Because it's actually not just one question. It's actually two questions in one sense, although the verses are spread out. But it's two questions. First, it's a statement about what Krishna said, and then there's some questions. Because we've been studying this sixth chapter for some days now. So you've also heard the process which Krishna has been explaining, especially from the verses 10 to 32. We've been hearing that, which is actually the stages of the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, let me just ask you all, does it seem easy to you, the process which Krishna has been explaining? To sit in a sacred place, neither too high nor too low, kusha grass, deerskin, soft cloth, sit back erect, neck, head and back erect, straight, stare at the tip of the nose, concentrate on your breathing. How does all this stuff sound to you? You can unmute and tell me, how does it sound? What do you think? Could you do this process? Yes, Mas Mother Kartika.
No, it's quite difficult, at least for me.
It's quite difficult. That might be the understatement of the year. The year is only 10 days old, so we can say that might be understatement of the year. Actually, this process, which Krishna has explained, is actually extremely difficult. It's not really for this age, actually. There are four ages, the Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. So in each age, there is a process of spiritual emancipation. It's called the Yuga Dham, the process which is given by Krishna of methodology of advancing spiritually for a particular age. So this process we've been studying, the Ashtanga Yoga process, is actually the age process in Satya Yuga. And in Satya Yuga, people live 100,000 years. So, if they're going to take 20 or 30,000 to perfect their yoga practice, it's not such a big deal. But in this age, this process is not really practical. And the reason for that is because we only have to just examine what's happening in our mind to see that. You see, this process which Krishna is explaining is especially about mind control. And in this age, actually, people's minds are so disturbed that even to sit, in half lotus or full lotus or meditation for 10 minutes is a huge thing for most people. It's just not at all practical. And then also we're hearing from Arjuna, who is coming at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. And at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, things are much more spiritual than they are now. So what is Arjuna saying? So I'm going to go back to 33, and we can study together. it'll give us a proper context then to look at the two verses at the end, 39 and 40, which we're studying today. So I've summarized a little bit the process that Krishna has explained, the process of staring at the tip of the nose by being conscious of the breath, by stopping the breathing, by withdrawing the mind from sense objects and withdrawing the mind from the desire to engage the senses and enjoy sense gratification, and then to actually focus the mind, and then to meditate. So if one does that, actually one can attain perfection. That is why Krishna says he is a perfect yoga by comparison with his own self. Sees the true quality of all beings, both in the happiness and distress. Because someone who's perfected this yoga system, wherever they look, they see Krishna. They don't see the body. They see soul and super soul. And everywhere they look, they see Krishna, because they've come to the state where they're in perfect communion with the super soul. So Krishna's explained the process and the result. And then this is what Arjuna says in 33. Arjuna said, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and endurable for me. The mind is restless and unsteady. And we all know that. No? The moment you decide you want to do something, the mind will give you trouble. No? Especially if that's a spiritual thing or something which requires you to do your duty. Then your mind will immediately give you trouble. No, let's do something. No, let me put that off for later and let me do it. So Arjuna is saying here it's restless and unsteady. Actually, the nature of the mind is that it can accept something and then 5 seconds later it wants to reject it. And then a minute after that, it wants to accept it again. Because that is what the mind is. The mind is a tool for accepting and rejecting. So if we haven't got the mind under control, we learned that at the beginning, actually. The mind, if it's not controlled, is the worst enemy of the living entity. And if it's controlled, it's the best friend. So this whole process is about mind control. And Arjuna is saying the mind's restless and unsteady. And in the next verse, actually, he says some more difficult things about the mind. He says, for the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. No? And he says, more difficult to control than the raging wind. So you can try that. You can go outside. I don't know, it's not so windy where we are. I don't know where. You can go outside and you can try and see if you can stop the wind. How successful will you be? No. I can't see anybody else, but Kirtika is shaking her head like this. You can't stop the wind. In fact, if the wind blows strong enough, it will carry you off. It'll blow away if the wind is strong enough. So Arjuna is using this analogy that it's more difficult to control the mind than the wind. Now, and actually, Vayu, Pavan, is considered to be one of the great demigods because he has so much power. If the wind blows fast enough, actually, it'll blow your building over, or it can knock down a skyscraper. So the wind is a very powerful demigod. The manifestation of that demigod is wind, actually, is very powerful. So actually, Arjuna is using especially some Sanskrit words here, which you'll see in the verse, which really indicate chanchalam. It's flickering. Flickering means is first it goes this way, then it goes that way, then it goes back this way again. Then it wants to go that way, then again it wants to come this way. Flickering means it's not steady. Like we see a candle flame, it flickers in the wind. It's not steady. So chanchalam. Then pramati, agitating. Pramati means it's agitating. The mind agitates you. Yes, I want to do this. No, I want to do that. No, I want to do something else. Actually, all you've got to do is sit in a shopping mall and watch people. And you can see how they're dragged around by their mind and senses. No, it agitates. The mind agitates one to do things. And then he says it's balavat. Balavat means, bala means strength. So balavat means it has a lot of strength. You know, you tell your mind, do this, and immediately it will tell you, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. And we all have experience of that. No? So actually, Srila Prabhupada has translated that word to be obstinate. So obstinate is a bit like stubborn. But if you have a deep understanding of English, you will know that obstinate is more stubborn than stubborn. Obstinate. It means even when somebody's obstinate, you use that word when they know very well what they should do, or they know very well what it should be, they oppose it. No, I'm not going to do that. Not just stubborn, I don't want to do it, but they actually fight against it. So this is the nature of the mind. And then the last thing is dridam. This dridam. Very, very obstinate. Now, even though you tell it what to do, and you're trying to be forceful, the mind opposes you. So these are 4 very good words in Sanskrit and English which describe the nature of the mind. Restless, turbulent, always like turbulence is there, changing, agitating, obstinate, and very strong. So strong, actually, that often we can't stop it. It just wants to do its own thing. So Arjuna is saying, therefore, to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So personally, I have to agree with him that the mind is very, very difficult to control. And this is Arjuna saying in the previous age. So if this is so difficult for Arjuna, what can we say about our mind? And actually, Arjuna was very steady personality in so many ways, able to fight on the battlefield in the face of thousands of warriors. So how can, if he's saying the mind is more difficult than the raging wind, what can we say about our mind? So this is Arjuna's challenge to Lord Krishna. This system of yoga just seems like, I can't do this, Krishna. Why are you asking me to do this? It's not possible for me. So then Krishna responds in 35, O mighty Arjuna, son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind. So Krishna's agreeing. Arjuna's analyzing, Krishna's saying, yes, you're right, actually. It is obstinate, it's turbulent, very strong, difficult to control, flickering, all these things. Krishna's agreeing. But then he says, but it is possible by suitable practice and detachment, because the mind is agitated, especially when the senses come into contact with their objects, because all the senses come together in the mind. And this chapter is all about mind control. So Krishna is saying it is possible. It's difficult for sure, but by suitable practice and detachment. So we've been seeing the suitable practice, that's the dhyana yoga. And we all agree it's kind of a bit difficult. But for us, it's easier for us as devotees. We're not up for this process of dhyana yoga. No way. No one can do that in this age. But Prabhupada over and over again in these purports is telling us that if we practice the bhakti yoga system, it's much easier actually, because we don't have to stop the mind. In this process of learning from Krishna in this 6th chapter, you have to stop the mind by artificial means, by a mechanical process. You have to stop getting involved in sense gratification. Tell the mind, do this. But it's better to engage the mind rather than try and stop it, actually. So that's what we do in devotional service. Anyway, we'll come back to this. So now from this statement in 35, Krishna goes on. It's possible by suitable practice and detachment. For one, his mind is unbridled. I'm reading from 36 now. Unbridled. That's a very good expression, actually. I don't know if any of you ride horses. Anyone rides horse? Do you know what the bridle is? The bridle actually is the thing that you put over the horse's head. It's a leather, it's kind of made of leather, and you put it over the horse's head. It fits quite snugly, but in the bridle, there's something called the bit. And the bit on the bridle actually fits in you pull it back, and it comes to the corner of the horse's mouth, the back of the horse's mouth, like that. And that is actually how you control the horse. You pull on the bridle, and it's painful to the horse, so the horse will, do what it's told because of that. So if you don't have any bridle, then you don't have a bit, and you can't control the horse. Even there's the expression that you get the bit between the teeth. I don't know if you've heard that expression. That's an expression in English. If you have the bit between you see that person has got the bit between his teeth. Because if you're too soft with the reins, if you relax the reins, then what happens is the bit becomes loose and the horse bites down on it. And then you can't control the horse because the horse has got the bit between its teeth. So Krishna is giving this analogy that you don't have the bridle, you don't have the bit, you can't control the horse. And similarly, if the mind is unbridled, if it's not controlled, then it makes self-realization extremely difficult. You can't meditate, you can't sit quietly, you can't do anything. But for he whose mind is controlled and strives by appropriate means, success is assured. So there are different methods of that. We've been studying this one of learning to control the mind through the breath and all those things. We also studied before that about working in a way which is not attached to the fruits. With attachment, we can do it like that. And we can also do it through bhakti yoga. So these are the 3 systems which Krishna constantly compares in the Bhagavad Gita. Working without fruitive results, cultivation of knowledge, using a meditation as a way to get release from the material nature. And then there's bhakti yoga. And over again, when Krishna is analyzing, we find that bhakti yoga is the supreme. And therefore, then it's the easiest, it's the quickest, and it's the most natural as well. So you find that all the way through these purports. Okay, so we come to 37. Arjuna said, now because the thing is, Krishna is assuring Arjuna, yes, it is possible actually, by suitable practice and detachment, it is possible. So then there's one doubt. Because it's such a difficult system, there's one doubt in Arjuna's mind. So this is what he says. Oh Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? So that's a regular thing, actually. Spiritual life is not easy. Why? Because the rest of society is going in the opposite direction. Most people think that actually life is meant for gratifying the senses. And also have been doing that for innumerable lifetimes. So now suddenly to try and take up the process of self-realization, we have to go against everything which is going on in society, go against our own habit patterns, which have been established over many years. So it's difficult. And Arjuna is saying, well, what happens if you take to the process and you're not successful? Then what's going to happen? And he gives a further qualification in 38. Almighty Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? You may have seen a riven cloud. Riven cloud means it's separated, somehow it's got separated from the bank of clouds. And if it's this little tiny cloud in a clear blue sky, what happens to it? It'll actually get burnt up by the sun. Instead of being droplets of water, it'll go back to being water vapor. So it kind of disappears. It doesn't really have any success in any sphere. So this is what Arjuna is asking. See, if you take up the process of self-realization and you're not successful, then you haven't got spiritual success. But if you started the process of self-realization, you gave up material endeavors, so you haven't got material success either. So you've tried to be a transcendentalist and no success in any sphere. So is that the situation? What happens to such a person? It's a good question. It's a really good question. And it's also a difficult question. And so that's what we find in the verse we're studying today. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt, because Krishna is the topmost authority. So Arjuna wants to know, you're telling me I must become a transcendentalist. What happens if I take up this path and I'm not successful? Then I won't have success in material life, and I won't have success in spiritual life. I have nothing, actually. So do you think it's a good question? It's a really good, that question concerns all of us, actually. We've all taken up spiritual life to some degree, and we've made sacrifices to make that possible, actually. We've sacrificed certain things in material life in order that we can practice as budding devotees. So it's not just a question for Arjuna, but it's a question for any transcendentalist, actually. And we've all become like that, all of us. We've all entered into the process of self-realization, the transcendental activity to try and free ourselves from this material world. So it's a good question for all of us. Okay, so now we come to this verse. So I've given the context, what we're looking at. Why is Arjuna inquiring? What does Arjuna feel? Who is Arjuna and what is the relationship to us? Is Arjuna a better transcendentalist than us? Yes, probably. And he's got this doubt. What to speak of us now? So therefore, he's identifying Krishna as the greatest authority to answer this question. Okay, so we're going to read the verse now, as we normally do, because I didn't want to discuss the verse until we have the context, because the verse is kind of meaningless on its own. We have to discuss the context. So it goes, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Parthanaive Namutra.
Parthanaive Namutra.
So Vinenas Tasya Vidyate.
Vinasastasya Vidyate.
Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschid.
Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschid.
Durgatim Tatagachati.
Durgatim Tatagachati.
So we're reading the verse then. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
Partha.
Son of Partha.
O son of Pritha.
Son of Pritha.
Because actually Prita is another name of Kunti Devi. Kunti Devi was Arjuna's mother, but she was originally, she was given in charity to a friend of King Shurasena, King Kunti Bhoj, because he didn't have children. So she was originally given the name Prita. But then when she was given to Kunti Bhoj, he gave the name Kunti. So it's the same personality. And because Arjuna is the son of Prita, therefore he's called Partha. Okay. Na eva.
Na eva.
Never it is so.
Never it is so.
Iha.
Iha.
In this material world.
In this material world.
Na.
No.
Na.
Never.
Never.
Amutra.
Amruta.
In the next life.
In the next life.
Vinashaha.
In the next life.
Vinashaha.
Destruction.
Destruction.
Tasya.
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 His.
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 Vidyate.
Vidyate.
Vidyate. Exists.
Na.
No.
Na.
Never.
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 He.
He.
Certainly.
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 Kalyana.
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 Kalyana Krit.
Kalyana.
Kalyana.
One who is engaged in auspicious activities.
One who is engaged in auspicious activities.
Kaschit.
Kaschit.
Anyone.
Anyone.
Durgatim.
Durgatim.
To degradation.
To degradation.
To degradation.
Tata.
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 My friend.
My friend.
Gachati.
Gachyati.
Goes.
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 Okay, it's a lot of work. And also it's not, this medium is not very good for doing this actually, because there's a delay. So it's a little difficult. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Prita, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction, either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So you can repeat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
The Supreme
Personality of Godhead said.
Personality of Godhead said.
Son of Prita.
Son of
Prita.
A transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities.
A transcendentalist
engaged in auspicious activities.
Does not meet with destruction.
Does not
meet
with
destruction.
Either in this world or in the spiritual world.
Either
in this world or in the spiritual world.
One who does good.
One who does good.
My friend.
My friend.
Is never overcome by evil.
Is never overcome by evil.
Okay. I'm going to read the purport. We'll take it little by little. Quite a long purport, actually. We'll see how far we get. We may not get through it all, actually. But I really wanted to give the context, because otherwise what Krishna is discussing here doesn't really have a strong meaning. So Krishna is saying, look, you know, even if you're unsuccessful, actually, because you're engaged in transcendental activity and because you're doing good, you won't be destroyed. Actually, it won't come to nothing, actually. You know, and we'll learn that actually in the verses that follow, 41 and 42, give the destination of a yogi who is unsuccessful after short practice in 41 and unsuccessful after long practice in 42. So Krishna is going to explain further than he's saying here. But the point is, I mean, really the point is that we don't lose it. Kartika and I were just having that discussion before the rest of you came on. You know, that whatever we've done spiritually in this life is preserved. And in the next life, we begin from where we left off, which is just as well. Otherwise, you'd probably never get out of the material world if it wasn't like that. Whereas I was just joking with Kirtika that she's involved in virology and that kind of thing now, immunology, sorry, but in the next lifetime, she may not be. She may not necessarily be involved in all that in the next lifetime, but whatever she's learned will be retained. It'll be given back to her in the next life, because Krishna wants to get us out of the material world. So therefore he preserves. He says that in the 9th chapter. He says, I preserve what they have, I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. My devotees, he says that. So we will get whatever we have learned in this lifetime will be returned in the next lifetime, we'll carry on. That's the principle. And that is why Krishna is saying a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction. Arjuna is saying, will it be a riven cloud? Will it get evaporated by the sun? And Krishna is saying, no, it's not like that actually. One who does good, one who's engaged in transcendental activity is never destroyed, either in this world or the spiritual world actually, but rather we will continue. Okay, so the verse which Prabhupada has quoted at the beginning of this purport is really interesting. Taktva sadamam chanam bhujam hare bhajan apakvo tapatet tato yadi yatra kwa vavidandram bimudamasyakim kavata apto bhajatam sadamata. So this is a verse from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it comes from a discussion between Vyasadeva and Narada Muni. And then this discussion comes because Vyasadeva has just done all this work. He has, what we can say, edited and divided the Veda and given its corollaries, and also written the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, and all that work. And after doing all that, he's feeling something's not right here. I'm not feeling satisfied. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but I'm not feeling satisfied. So this verse comes from that discussion. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17, Sri Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva as follows. So what is he saying in this verse? If someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. It should remind us of a verse from Bhagavad Gita. We'll come to that in a minute. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. So this verse requires a little explanation. You see, the thing is, if we do all our material duties nicely, whatever we're supposed to do, first class, but we don't become a devotee of Krishna, we don't make some effort on the spiritual path, then what's the use of all that? What is the use? Because when you leave this body, all those activities you've done, the results of them will be left behind. So really, it comes to nothing. We do all that work to establish ourselves materially, and it comes to nothing. But if someone engages in transcendental activity, that is preserved. And even if they're not successful, it doesn't matter because they pick up from where they left off. So this is what Krishna, this is why Prabhupada cited this verse, to remind us, to expand this point that Krishna is making. The one is never overcome, actually, if one does good. So it should remind you of a verse. I'm hoping it'll remind you of a verse from earlier in our studies, not so long ago, actually. I'll give you a clue, it's chapter 2. And it's one of the first things that Krishna says after he's finished dealing with Arjuna's arguments. Anyone knows the verse or can understand which verse I'm talking about?
Is it Karpanya dosha?
Karpanya dosha. No, good try though. Good try. It's actually 240. The verse I'm thinking of is 240. You can turn it up and we can all read it. (240). Neha Brikkamanasosti is the verse I was thinking of, where Krishna says, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. So diminution means it's get less, right? If something diminishes, it gets less. There's no loss, and there's no loss on doing it, and whatever credit you get doesn't diminish. So it's the same point, no? Because Krishna just was telling Arjuna, I want you to work without fruitive results, and that's difficult. So Krishna says, okay, if you do that, whatever you gain won't be lost spiritually. So it's the same point that Krishna is making here, and the same point that Prabhupada is quoting a verse from the discussion between Vyasadeva and Narada Muni. Same point. If someone gives up all material prospects, in other words, if you stop endeavoring for material results and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way, actually. No, you don't lose anything, actually. Whatever you've done there, you retain that. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. Because it's not lasting, just lasts for that body. So Prabhupada is elucidating this point. So it should give us confidence, actually. This Prabhupada actually poses that question, is the spiritual path easy? I know Prabhupada tells us Bhakti Yoga is very easy, but it's like Prabhupada once said, that in theory it's easy. The problem is the difficulty is the practice. That's the problem. In principle, it's very easy. Just surrender to Krishna and do everything for Krishna. I mean, what could be easier in principle? But the practice is difficult because we're attached, because our mind wants to do other things, because we're not steady in our service. So in principle, though, it's very easy, but in practice, it's somewhat difficult. So therefore, we may feel discouraged. No, why should I do this? Not easy, I've got to endeavor in things which don't come natural to me. I have to in the beginning, you have to grit your teeth a little bit, and not do the things you're used to, not go after the sense gratification. So should I really do that? Is there any gain long term in doing that? So Krishna is assuring us in this verse, one who does good, my friend, it's interesting that Krishna puts it that way. Tata means my friend. It's like a father to a son. Very intimate, actually. Krishna's telling, look, Arjuna, like a father might tell his son. Son saying, look, Daddy, I don't want to do this, and the father's telling his son, look, my dear son, what I'm telling you is for your own good. So tata is used here, like that, like a friend, like a father to a son. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So Krishna is reassuring. Okay, first thing. For material, I'm reading on from the purport, from where the quote in English ends. For material prospects, there are many activities, both scriptural and customary. The spiritual ones are what we call karma. That is the definition of karma, actually. It's sense gratification, but it's given in a way that won't degrade you. It's accepted in the Veda. So that's scriptural. Many material activities, but they're scriptural. They're allowed because Krishna knows you want to get your sense gratification, but at least do it in a religious way. And they're customary. Those that we do because we're living in a society and people expect you to behave in a certain way. A transcendentalist is supposed to give up all material activities for the sake of spiritual advancement in life, Krishna consciousness. That's what Krishna's preaching to us in Bhagavad Gita. That's what Prabhupada's preaching to us, and all the devotees are telling us. Come on, try and make some endeavor in spiritual life. One may argue that by Krishna consciousness, one may attain the highest perfection if completed. But if one does not attain such a perfectional stage, then he loses both materially and spiritually. So Prabhupada is restating the question, the answer, the question of Arjuna. That isn't it true, that spiritual life is difficult. And if we give up material things, then we may lose both ways. We didn't attain success in spiritual life, and we gave up the material endeavor. So we didn't attain success there either. So Prabhupada is restating Arjuna's question. It is enjoined in the scriptures that one has to suffer the reaction for not executing prescribed duties. Therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subject to these reactions. Everyone has their duty, customary or scriptural. And if you don't do it, because your duty, you're going to get reaction. You'll probably get degraded in the next lifetime. You won't have so much freedom. The Bhagavatam assures the unsuccessful transcendentalist that there need be no worries. Sometimes people tell you that, no? Your friend WhatsApps you and you write back and you say, oh, I didn't do that thing. And your friend writes back and says, no worries. You ever get that from your friends? No problem or no worries, no? No worries means it's okay, Okay, you may have not done it, but it's no worries. You don't have to worry about that. Even though he may be subjected to the reaction for not perfectly executing prescribed duties, he is still not a loser because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten. And one so engaged will continue to be so, even though born the next life. You see, there is no impediment to devotional service. That's the point. You may get, the birth may not be so fancy because you didn't execute your duties perhaps as well as you should have, but the point is your spiritual activity won't be lost. And there is no impediment to spiritual activity also. That material situation can't stop it. So you may get a lower birth, but the thing is your spiritual practice from the previous lifetime will act. And Krishna will give you opportunity. And since there's no impediment to spiritual life, then it won't matter actually. So this is why Prabhupada's saying, no worries. Don't worry, Even if you get a low birth, it doesn't matter actually. You will still get the opportunity to grow in spiritual life. On the other hand, one who simply follows strictly the prescribed duties need not necessarily attain auspicious results if he's lacking in Krishna consciousness. Because the thing is, you do your duty, what's the use of it? It'll just give you material things which will be taken away at the end of that particular lifetime. So you won't necessarily have anything permanent unless there's Krishna consciousness attached to it. So Prabhupada is just elucidating that point of making the comparison. One who does spiritual activity will not be the loser. Even if materially things get a little bit worse, it won't stop the spiritual life. But one is very expert in executing his duties with no Krishna consciousness. What's the use of it? Because it'll all be lost. So this point is made here, also in the Bhagavatam in many places, and Krishna already made the point in the 2nd chapter. There's no loss or diminution, even if you're not successful. And Krishna will go on to explain what happens as a result of that transcendental activity which has been performed in 2 ways. In 41, unsuccessful after short practice, and in 42, unsuccessful after long practice. So that's coming. So we won't get into that. So I'm going from the second paragraph of the purport. The purport may be understood as follows. In other words, Prabhupada's going to sum up for us now. Prabhupada does this a lot, actually. He'll elucidate the point which Krishna or the speaker is making in the verse. He'll elucidate it. He'll blow that point up and make it easier for understand. And then he'll actually give a summary, draw a conclusion from that. This is what Prabhupada's doing now. The purport may be understood as follows. Humanity may be divided into 2 sections. So Prabhupada here is, pointing out that there are transcendentalists and there are materialists. So 2 sections. Namely, the regulated and the non-regulated. Those who live by the Veda and those who don't. Those who engage simply in bestial sense gratifications without knowledge of their next life or spiritual salvation belong to the non-regulated section. They're just what Prabhupada calls polished animals, There's no difference because also the animals, eat, sleep, defend, and mate. So if we just do that, we're no better than the animals. So that's why Prabhupada says it's bestial, no better than the animals. That's one sin. That's one part of society, not regulated, have no faith in spiritual life. They just live for the gratification of the senses. And Krishna's already told us that if they do that, they live in vain. They have no real progress. So at least we shouldn't be like that. Those engaged simply in bestial sense gratification without knowledge in the next life or spiritual salvation belong to the non-regulated section. And those who follow the principles of prescribed duties in the scriptures are classified among the regulated section. They're the ones who perform karma. Karma means it's accepted by the Veda. You can do it, you get your sense gratification, but it won't degrade you. And since you're following authority, you'll get elevated. The non-regulated section, both civilized and non-civilized, educated and non-educated, strong and weak, are full of animal propensities. Prabhupada says they're polished animals. They're no different because human life is not meant for that. And you can understand that because the animals are better at doing that than we are. The sense gratification available in animal life is actually better than it is in human life. They have more facility to do that than we do. So therefore you can understand human life is meant for something else. Their activities are never auspicious, because what does auspiciousness mean in the fullest sense of the word? It means connection with the Lord. It means connection with Krishna. It means Krishna conscious activity, something that will actually bear fruit in the long run. So the activities of those persons who are non-regulated is never auspicious, because while enjoying the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, and defending and mating, they perpetually remain in material existence, which is always miserable. What's this material world called? Dukkalayam ashashvatam. This material world, whether we're prepared to accept that or not, is full of misery. This much pleasure and this much suffering. That's what material life is, actually. That is built in by Krishna to remind us, this place you don't belong here. No? So this is what Prabhupada's saying. Unregulated, no, it's inauspicious. There's no real result. You just get returned to the path of birth and death over and over again. What use is it? No? So we have to do something else. So then Prabhupada says, on the other hand, those are regulated by scriptural injunctions, who follow the path of scripture, and who thus rise gradually to Krishna consciousness, certainly progress in life. Not materially. Prabhupada doesn't count that as progression. The scripture doesn't count that. That's not really progression. Progressive life means to revitalize our relationship with Krishna and gradually move towards his lotus feet. There's no diminution in that. But even if you're big, whatever, Bill Gates, I don't know, I think they just said that Elon Musk is now the richest person in the world, no? He just overtook Jeff Bezos. I think Jeff Bezos is Amazon CEO. They're saying that this character, Elon Musk, he just overtook. He's now the richest man in the world. But what use is that to him in the next life? What use is it? No? You may have heard that sage who gave benedictions. He's giving different benedictions to different people. So he saw, first of all, he saw one brahmachari. So he told the brahmachari, better you die now. Because brahmachari is living regulated life, following his spiritual master. So he's perfect. So better you die now. And the next person he saw was a prince. They told the prince, better you live forever. Why? Because the prince is enjoying very nicely now, but in the next lifetime, all that will be gone. So he told the prince, he was giving benedictions, he told the prince, you live forever. He told the brahmachari, you die now. Then he saw a butcher, and he told the butcher, don't live, don't die. Because if he lives, he's continuing to build on his bad karma, and if he dies, he's going to get his bad karma. So the blessing to him was, don't live, don't die. And then last, he saw a Vaishnava, and he told the Vaishnava, live, die, doesn't matter, it's the same for you. Because if you're a Vaishnava, when you're living, you're increasing your connection with Krishna, and when you die, you'll get your connection with Krishna. So he said to the Vaishnava, you live, die, doesn't matter, it's the same for you. No, so that is our path, actually. But we shouldn't be like the prince, oh, better you live forever. Actually, my spiritual master had a kind of friend, associate, you could say. He was preaching to him for maybe 25 years. Very, very rich person, extremely rich. He bought a house in Cape Town in one of the most exclusive communities in the whole of South Africa, and that the house cost him 80 million rands. That was the house, and it kind of didn't dent his purse very much. No? So one time they were sitting talking, because my spiritual master has been working on him for 25 years. So one time they were talking, and they were talking about longevity. So this person who got so much money, he thinks he can buy, from the doctors, he'll be able to extend his life. So he was telling my spiritual master, I want to live for 100 years, at least 100 years. And my spiritual master turned to him and looked at him and he said, only? Only? In other words, he's like the prince, you better live longer because, at least you're enjoying now. But when you end this body, all that will be finished. So we should be like the devotee. Live, lie, doesn't matter. That's how we should be. So that we have to make progress on the spiritual path. So we should make progress in life. That's the point. Not material progress, but rather spiritual progress should be our objective. And wherever we're at, it doesn't matter. Wherever we're at in our spiritual development, that's great. That's wonderful. I applaud you for that. But the point is we have to move forward. What Srila Prabhupada calls the progressive march, back to home, back to Godhead. So wherever we're at, it's great. It means you've started the path. You're just some distance down the path. But we must endeavor to go closer to Krishna's lotus feet, to follow the direction Srila Prabhupada is giving us. And Prabhupada assures us, Krishna is assuring us, no loss, no diminution. One who does good is never overcome by evil. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. No, so this is Krishna's assurance to us. Krishna's encouraging us. Just like when a baby is walking, the child is walking for the first time. Even if you have no connection with that child and you are in the room where that child is walking, learning to walk, how do you feel? Isn't it? You put your arms out, you tell that child, come, come. You encourage the child to walk. So this is what Krishna is doing for us. He's encouraging us. No, come on, Arjuna. Come on, Arjuna. He knows everybody else is listening as well. Come on, you people, Try, come, engage in this process of civilization. Chant my names, take prasadam, associate with the devotees favorably. Read Prabhupada's books, because, there won't be any loss. Prabhupada once said, they were talking about book distribution. Prabhupada was talking about book distribution with some of his disciples. And he said, if they touch the book, they get benefit. And then Prabhupada thought for a moment, he said, even if they see the book, they get benefit. Because since there's no loss or diminution in this lifetime, if they see the book in this lifetime and nothing else happens, what is guaranteed in the next life? They will again see the book. They'll get an opportunity. That's where they got to. They just saw the book. So again, they'll get an opportunity to take a book. Even on that level, this is why Prabhupada said, even if they see a book, they get benefit. Their spiritual life starts, actually. So that is the glory of our, something as simple as that. Just a little bit of advancement on this path can save one from the most dangerous type of fear. No loss or diminution. So that's Krishna's encouragement from us. He's like telling us, come to me. Like that. So these verses are very wonderful for that reason. Okay, I've talked a bit too much, and now we've got another paragraph to go through. Let's see. Those who are following the path of auspiciousness can be divided into 3 sections. And we should recognize this from our previous studies, actually. Followers of the scriptural rules and regulations who are enjoying material prosperity. They are the ones who are called the Sakam Karma Yogis. Well, maybe that's kind. Maybe we can say they're the Karma Kandis. At least they're following some regulative process. They're accepting the Vedas. They're getting their sense grab, but they're getting it in a religious way. No? So that's the first. The followers of scriptural rules and regulations who are enjoying material prosperity. Because if you follow those rules, it works. You do get material prosperity, but also you get a little bit of spiritual advancement as well. So that's the first class. Those who are trying to find the ultimate liberation from material existence, they are the Gyanis. It's called neti in Sanskrit. It means not this, not that. Is this the path of spiritual life? Is this the spiritual nature? Not this, not that. So by mental speculation, they're trying to get free from this material world. So that's the Gyanis. Then those who are devotees in Krishna consciousness. So these are the 3 classes. And over and over again, we'll see this in Bhagavad Gita. Those who are working, those who are trying to figure it out by mental speculation, and the devotees. These 3 classes always come up in the discussion, actually. Those who are devotees to Krishna consciousness. Those who are following the rules and regulations of the scriptures for material happiness may be further divided into 2 classes. Those who are fruitive workers, and those who desire no fruit for sense gratification. Sakam and Nishkam. Sakam becomes Nishkam. No? It's 10 to 16 in the 3rd chapter. And then from the 17th verse onwards, it becomes Nishkam. They do the duty, but they have no reason to do the duty because they're already purified. So this is what Prabhupada's dividing here. Those who are fruitive workers and those who desire no fruit of sense gratification. Those who are after fruitive results of sense gratification may be elevated to a higher standard of life, even to the high planets. That's the general understanding, actually. Especially people who come from the Vedic culture, so who have the Vedic culture for some extent. This is a general understanding that, if I do the right things, I can go to the heavenly planets in the next life. But still, because they are not free of material existence, they are not following the truly auspicious path. Because auspiciousness doesn't mean material things. It may be auspicious for some time, but then it will go away. So it's not truly auspicious. Truly auspicious is that which brings us to Krishna's lotus feet. The only auspicious activities are those which lead one to liberation. Any activity which is not aimed at the ultimate self-realization or liberation from material bodily concept of life is not at all auspicious. Why? It is not long-lasting. Something which is genuine auspicious is permanent, it's eternal, it's long-lasting, not something which is here today and gone tomorrow. That's why Krishna says that, a wise man knows that these pleasures have a beginning and an end, and therefore he doesn't indulge in them. What's the use? It's here today, gone tomorrow. So it's not truly auspicious. Any activity is not aimed at ultimate self-realization or liberation from the material body concept of life is not at all auspicious, Prabhupada would say. Not is only not auspicious, it's not at all auspicious because it's temporary in nature. Why would you want to do that? Why you work for something which is temporary and it's going to be taken away from you when you can work for something which is permanent? Which even if you don't get it right, whatever you got to in this lifetime, You'll get it given back to you in the next lifetime, and you continue. You try doing that with your bank balance. You know, you can pay it into a bank account somewhere, and then, I don't know how you do that, but anyway, you walk into the bank in the next life, and you say, you know, this is my bank balance from the previous life. What will they tell you? They'll probably get the security guards and throw you out of the bank, actually. So what is the use of these activities? This is the point that Krishna and Prabhupada are making. What is the use of them? Like, sure, we have to do our duty, we have to maintain our situation, but not more than necessary. And then whatever is left over, let's pour that into spiritual life, and let's make some genuine advancement. Activity in Krishna consciousness is the only auspicious activity, and anyone who voluntarily accepts all bodily discomforts for the sake of making progress on the path of Krishna consciousness can be called a perfect transcendentalist under severe austerity. Actually, we don't, you know, these words are a bit scary when you hear Prabhupada say this, you know, things like, what is it he says here? Under severe austerity. It sounds scary, you know. But Prabhupada said the only austerity we have in our movement is following the four regulative principles. That's the only austerity. At another time, he said the only austerity is getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's written that even if you pretend to be a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you must get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, even if you're pretending. So Prabhupada said these are the only austerities, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, following the regulative principles. And our process is so nice. Once a newspaper reporter asked Prabhupada, he said, you know, if there wasn't any Krishna and there wasn't any spiritual world, would you still follow this process? And Prabhupada thought for a moment and he said, yes, I'd still follow it because it's so nice. This process is so nice. Chant, dance, and be happy. You know, so it's been made so easy for us. There's no question of severe austerity, although Prabhupada's saying it in this purport. You're just being, you know, chant, dance, and be happy. You know what? Chant, dance, and eat prasad and be happy. You know, what is the difficulty? That's Shrutikirti Prabhu's book. What's the difficulty? You know, this process is so nice. And because the Eightfold Yoga system is directed towards the ultimate realization of Krishna consciousness, such practice is also auspicious. And no one who's trying his best in this matter need fear degradation. So even for this sage who's trying to perform this practice of Ashtanga Yoga, which is very, very difficult, don't worry. Bahunam Jamanam Ante, Krishna says a little later, you know, after many, many births. But don't worry, eventually you'll get it. The Supreme Lord is actually the cause of all causes, and then you'll surrender and you'll get the result. So even one is following this path. What to speak of us as practicing devotees? This path is moved so simple, actually, so easy. Of course, the practice is a little difficult, but at least in theory, it doesn't sound difficult, you know. Okay, unfortunately, I hoped I kind of had 10 minutes left over, but because it's a long purport, so we used up the time. Anyway, I'm wondering if there's comment or question. I see there's 4 things on the chat. Let's have a look. Please write your questions on the chat from our hostess. Okay, just wanted to share with the group, I picked up a bookmark that I'd written on the back in 2012, a low point when I approached him in earnest and somewhat relevant to mind control we are discussing today. Fix your mind upon me, be devoted to me, adore me, and make obeisances to me. Thus, uniting yourself with me entirely, depend upon me, you shall come to me. Sorry to jump ahead. No, this is a nice verse. This verse is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. This verse you're quoting from, 934. Actually, Krishna says, engage your mind in always thinking of me, manmana, bhavamad bhakto, become my devotee. Offer your obeisances to me, worship me, being fully absorbed in me. Surely you will come to me. This is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, actually. Actually, the essence is just the first 2 words. Manmana. That's the essence. Always engage your mind in thinking of me. Yes, it's not jumping ahead. It's going back and making the point very nicely. This is the essence. If we get nothing else from Bhagavad Gita, you should tattoo this verse on your forehead. So whenever you look in the mirror, you'll see it. Or pin it on your fridge at home. This verse, engage your mind in always thinking of me, become my devotee. Later on in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I'm telling you this because you're my dear friend. Don't worry, you'll come to me. I promise you this, Krishna says, because you're my very dear friend. He's telling Arjuna, but he's also telling us. So it's a very nice comment. Not sorry, actually. We appreciate that comment very much. Yes, everyone should memorize this verse, at least this one verse. Actually, this one verse is right in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita. It is verse number 351. It's right in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita's most important verse out of all the verses. It's called Paribhasa Sutra, the verse which explains all the other verses. Very, very important verse, 934. I'll test you next week to see if you've learned it. I'm just joking.
Hare Krishna.
Avinash says,
Sorry to interrupt. I
Yes,
just put that
Vishal.
verse on. I think it's just such a coincidence. I read it this morning, and I'll show you the bookmark if you
no,
want.
it's not a coincidence.
Let me
No,
show
it's
you.
not a coincidence. Krishna
Wait
is
a second.
talking to you. Krishna is talking to you, Vishal.
I think he's
These
talking
things
to
are
all of
not
us.
coincidence.
That's the bookmark with my
Yes.
kids on it.
Yes, that's the
That's the
bookmark.
verse at the back.
Amazing.
You know.
Yes.
So
You see, these
incredible.
things are not coincidence.
Yeah.
These things are not coincidence. When we sit in class and the devotee says something, Krishna is talking to us. Vishal, I want to say this to you today because I know you picked up my bookmark.
This
So
was
Krishna is
a long
instructing us
time
in this
ago,
way.
you know. But
Yeah, so Krishna is
quick,
reminding you, Vishal, you're my devotee. Why are you messing around in this material world? Why don't you come back to me?
well, this is something I don't want to take up too much time, but this happens. You know, you go in and out of things.
Yeah,
And I'm just picking on
that
a
is
few
called
things you said,
initiative.
which was really, really important, that you don't lose things, you build on it. And that's very reassuring.
Yes,
But I wonder,
yes.
when you talk about the Jnana Yoga, you talk about Bhakti Yoga, and you talk about Karma Yoga, is there a black and white, or do you end up doing bits of all of them? Because when you perform your duty with Nishkam Karma, you surrender the fruits of your action to Krishna. That's your Bhakti, isn't it? And then your Jnana
But
is
it's
that
not really bhakti at
peace.
that stage. That's, you see, Vishal, what we're studying here, rungs on a ladder.
Yeah.
We began with Kama Kanda. That was in the beginning of the 3rd chapter. Then we went to Sakam Karma Yoga. That's verses 10 to 16, basically. And then 17 onwards is Nishkam Karma Yoga. But in Karma Yoga, we're not devotees fully because we're doing what we want and we're offering it to Krishna.
Right.
Bhakti Yoga is when we do what Krishna wants.
What he wants.
So
Absolutely.
that's the difference.
That's spot on.
Yes,
Thank
what
you
he
so
wants.
much for that, Hare
So
Krishna.
that is, yeah, that's
really,
actually the difference. And when
the
we
pennies
do
drop
what
there.
Krishna wants, that means doing what the spiritual master tells you.
Yeah. And then you're listening to him and you've communed
When
with
the
him. And that
spiritual master
verse
tells
becomes
you,
relevant.
when you do it, that's bhakti, because
Yeah.
you're doing, because Krishna's representative is the spiritual master. But if
That's when you've
want for Krishna, that's Karma Yoga.
and that's when you've communed with him and you're living through that verse. Yeah, that makes sense now. Thank you.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, is that all right, Vishal?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we got something else here from Avinash. On detachment, what decision an individual should make between serving at the temple and serving the family? If a person has an ill mother and sister and is looking after but needs support, should individual service at the temple be home to support the family and look after mum? Okay, you see, actually, we can consider that actually, you see, that I am a family member and I'm trying to be a devotee of Krishna. And chances are your mum is a devotee. Can we ask that question, Avinash? Is your mum a devotee? Avinash?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Is your mum a devotee?
No, I'm not asking about, it's not for me. I'm asking on behalf
okay.
of someone else.
On behalf of someone else.
Yeah, mom is not a devotee.
Not a devotee.
No.
Okay, but by serving mum in this way, by someone who is a devotee, she'll become impressed. She'll become impressed. And you can consider, that this is my mother. She gave birth to me, and I'm trying to be a devotee. So for that reason alone, she's glorious. And therefore, I should serve her. I should actually perform that duty of looking after her, as much as required.
Yeah.
But no more than required, no more than necessary. And then with whatever time left over, one can serve in the temple. But one cannot use serving in the temple as an excuse for neglecting your duty. Otherwise, Arjuna would have got away with it. Krishna would have said, it's okay, Arjuna. Yeah, Arjuna would have got away with it. What did Krishna tell Arjuna? No, do your duty. And Arjuna's duty was fighting with bows and arrows and killing his family members. So we can't hide from our duty, actually, but rather we should Krishnaize it as much as we can. Krishnaize it. Yes, this is my mother. She gave me. okay, I'm a devotee. You know, when my mother left her body, I went to England actually for 10 days to be with her. She had cancer before she left her body. I went for England for 10 days. I told my spiritual master afterwards, when she left about a week after. So I told my spiritual master, you know, that I went to England and I was with my mother for 10 days. So he told me, because you're a devotee, she will attain a very auspicious destination. You know? So we should never worry about that. We should do our duty nicely. Our mother is a special person, especially if you're a devotee, and she will attain a very auspicious destination. So we shouldn't hide from our duty. We should do our duty nicely and more, and then whatever time left over, we can go to the temple. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for confirming. This is what my advice was to this person, but he is more reluctant to say, no, I should be doing my duty, serving at the temple. But I said you are neglecting your duty to serve your mom.
Yes, you're neglecting your duty. Yeah.
Yeah.
One time, Srila Prabhupada told off one of his female disciples for leaving her children not very well attended to do deity service. Srila Prabhupada told her, your children are your deities. They come first.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're done then?
Any more questions or comments?
Anyone has comments or realizations? You see, Vishal's realization was so nice that he shared that with us, you know. You see that Krishna is busy working on Vishal. Right, Vishal?
Hare Krishna. Yep. Sometimes a
Yeah.
bit too much.
But that's the duty of a good father, you know. A good father will not let his son get away with it. Rather, he'll remind. So, Vishal, you're such a nice devotee. Krishna's like, come on, Vishal, you know, start walking now. It's time to wake up now.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other comment or question or realization? Okay, looks like we're done then.
Okay, thank you very much, Prabhuji. I hand over to Path Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we'll have your association next week. I'll send you the verse, the text.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
If you have time, do a little harmonium, if you have time.
Yes, Prabhuji, I will. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your wonderful class. It is really very wonderful. And also, after that, Arjun's question and how Krishna giving their answer. This is very nice, and we are so memorizing here. Well, thanks to you, and also thanks the same time all the devotees join here, giving their precious time. So I request all the devotees, please unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra once for Shyamanand Krishna Prabhu's wonderful class. Please join with me. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Hare
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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Hare.
Vancha
Kripa eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo.
His Grace Shyamanand Prabhu ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Ki
Jai.
jai.
Hi, go.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, I'm ending the session. Vishal?